turn your camera off. That's fine. It's not going to bother me. All right. So this project is something I've been thinking about for a long time. My son, Patrick, is a wonderful boy, very, very, very smart. Just found out that in 6th grade, he's reading at an 8th grade level, which is awesome. Love that. But he is slower taking tests. One of the things we saw in the last round on his math, and yes, I'm throwing him under the bus on this recording, is that he scored at his grade level, but he didn't finish like 20% of the test. He never even got to the questions. So part of it is, like in that scenario, I don't know what the standardized test here in Ohio looks like. I've never taken it. My wife has some insight into that, but I know I learned all these lessons on how to take a test years and years and years ago. How you run through and you do the easy ones first and mark the ones that are hard. And part of going through and running through and looking at the questions and answering the easy one first is you might find an answer later on or a question later on that has something in it that answers something earlier on in the test. So maybe one of those harder ones, you've got an answer that you see later. In fact, I had that exact scenario when I took my AWS cert. There were 2 of the 5 that I marked as hard questions that I wasn't sure how to answer them. I did find answers. 2 of those 5, I found answers later in the test, so I was able to come back and confidently say, "Hey, these are right." So I want to build something. I want to build a website. I want to build a simple website. I want to build a website that and this is something we can talk about, but I want to build a website that really doesn't have a back end to it. In my mind, there's no real reason to know who it is that's logged in. There's no real history to track here, but I want to build something where they can walk through how to take a test. This is something that's visual, audio, kinesthetic. We catch all those rounds. Yes, I was a vocational teacher, so I know that kind of stuff. And, my standing up in front of a classroom and talking about how to take a test for somebody that is an oral learner, learns by hearing, that's great. Somebody like my son is bored and staring out the window or drawing pictures. Most of that's not getting absorbed. I want to build something where they can jump in and they can walk through. And I did take some notes and that kind of stuff, so we're going to get to that here. So my primary goal on this project is to build something to help my kids with test-taking skills. I've got a 3-year-old daughter, but she's not taking tests yet, but that's coming, right? And I want to work with developers. I mean, I did pitch this out to 100 devs. I know there are about 3 or 4 that aren't 100 devs that asked to be involved as well. Wonderful. Love the fact that we've got a lot of volunteers willing to jump in and help with this. Like I mentioned before the recording, I can't afford to pay anybody, so my payment will be getting to know you to mentor a little bit through this process. I would like to use good, solid business practices, so there should be a lot that you can pick up on how business works and maybe showcase that in some of your projects, as well as if you need a recommendation as you're going through and applying for jobs, which I know some folks are, having seen you write code, I could make that kind of a recommendation. Okay. To me, that's an important thing. Okay. Those are my goals with this. We as a team can add more goals as we go later on into the project. Okay. This is going to become our project, not mine, as we move forward. Okay. So what am I asking for? At the end, I'm asking for volunteers. Like I said it before, can't pay anybody. Payment is in those referrals. There's a big if that popped into my head before I threw this out there is, what if somebody decides they want to buy this thing out? What if somebody decides they want to monetize this, whatever, buy us out and go forward with it, which means somebody somewhere along the way gets a paycheck, right? I don't know what that's going to look like. I don't even know if it's going to happen. It's a big if, right? I'm not building it to sell. That was not in my goals, right? I would like to build this to help my children. If it helps other people, fine. If somebody likes it enough to make it a part of their business, great. We'll talk about that when we get there. Okay. My intent is to be fair with anyone involved. Okay. And in my mind, it's not going to matter the involvement level. If I've got somebody that hops in and helps update documentation, that's, to me, is just as important as the persons that are fielding issues that come up as people start to use the website. Okay. I'm not asking for this to be a long-term commitment. My best guess is, with the number of people that we've got, is that we're probably going to get to about 80-90% where this is reasonably functional in about 2 to 3 months. And this is not beating you guys up in time. Okay, I'm looking at a very slow pace. I've got some ideas on that on the next slide. Get to that functional level. For me, this is a long-term project. This is to be something for my kids. I got a 3-year-old daughter. Eventually she's going to reach that 3rd or 4th grade level, or she'll start to take the standardized test, and we'll need something like this. So I want this to be in place and still working for her then. So there is some opportunity for down the road. It becomes an open source project. It becomes something that you can remain involved with if you want to. Okay. So let's move on to the time, because again, that's something else I'm asking. The absolute minimum is you don't have to do anything if you don't want to. You can just follow along. Okay. My intent, as I said earlier, was to record a lot of these major interactions as we write code, as we pair on code, as we review code, as we build this project out from the ground up, and all the surrounding parts to it. So I'm going to record a lot of that. I'm going to post it on my YouTube channel. If you don't know where that is, get with me later. I'll make sure you know where that is. Okay. I won't have the actual section for the channel in there until after this recording is done and I put it in place, because it's a weird YouTube thing, but we'll figure that out. Okay. The maximum is what you can manage. One of the things I'd like to put in place, I want to get to know you guys, because if I'm going to do a referral, I gotta know you probably a little better than I do now as a developer. So I'd like to look at a one-on-one probably every other week. It could be more frequent than that, less frequent than that. It's what you need, what the project needs, kind of thing. Time-wise, I would like to see 1 to 2 hours a week, no more than that. Okay, it can be more, but my guess is with 30 people trying to put in more than 2 hours a week, I'm going to get buried so fast. I'm going to burn out, and I'm not looking for me to burn out too in the process. Okay. When I say follow the recordings as needed, a lot of these recordings are going to repeat in some places. We got to build out cards, build out work that needs to be done. And there are a lot of cards that are going to need to be built out and content put in and fleshed out so that you guys can work on what needs to be built there. Okay. Honestly, once you see 3 or 4 cards built, you're going to understand that pattern. You probably don't need to sit and watch the recording for all 30, 40, 50 cards that we might have to build for this system to be put together. Okay. And stretch goal on your time. I'd really like folks to learn something new. I know some of the folks coming in from outside 100 devs, may or may not have the Angular skills. I know at least 2 that said that they did have some Angular skills, which is what we're building the project in. Those in 100 devs, most of you probably have not worked with Angular, so very easy to find something that you haven't learned before. And I fully intend to support your learning on that and do a couple of sessions on what do I expect to see in there. As your time goes, you're going to see that I'm pretty brutal with code reviews. If you've ever had me work on your resume, I'm just as bad. Okay. I am brutal with those. Okay. I expect very, very good code, very high quality code. It's not to say you wrote bad code. It's just, I want good code in the repository because I'm the one that's got to maintain this long term. Okay. And so my expectations will be very high. I'm like that with everybody. Okay. It's not a take on you and the code you wrote. It's, I want this project to have good code. Okay. When you write the code and you submit it, it's no longer your code, it's the project's code. Okay. So the review is over the project's code. And I think we should all maintain that high level on that. Okay. So the project is to take a look at test taking best practices. And a lot of the reason I was mentioning teachers, having been a vocational teacher myself, is test taking best practices. I think we really need to narrow down what they are. These are the first 6 that came to my mind in the last 2 days. not going out and looking at any articles, not looking at getting any information on what the best practices are and seeing what fits the categories. There may be more, there may not. Okay. So somebody or a couple of people, I don't know, are going to have to get together and figure out what those best practices are that we want to highlight in this application. Okay. And I am going to talk about how I foresee us highlighting that. And I think what I've got in mind is a pretty good concept. And you guys can tell me if I'm way off base or if we need to change something. Okay. Okay. So Katie, you've got a question?
Yeah, if you are sharing your screen, I'm not seeing it. Are other people seeing it? You are? Okay,
Yeah, I
like
see
the
it.
slides? Okay, sorry, I'm not seeing it for whatever reason. I just see your picture. Okay,
Okay.
thank you.
Yeah, I'm not quite sure. Check what you've got pinned. If you have me pinned, you might have to unpin it to see the main screen. So yeah, from a Google Meet perspective, not 100% sure. All right, she found it. Good. All right. So moving forward, this is the full depth of the handwritten notes that I do when I start a project. It's usually 1 or 2 pages. Yes, it's hard to read. Don't worry about that. It'll be in the wiki eventually on the repo. Okay. As I go through, this is me brainstorming. If you look at this, there's really not a lot of organization to it. I'm just throwing ideas down, like things like the Discord down at the bottom. I wanted to make sure I have a Discord that we can all hop in and chat together on this project and keep up to date and that kind of stuff. I get to know each other. This is not what the project is. It's going to be built out better. This is just a brainstorm. Okay. I mean, that's the term I usually use when I do this. I just get everything down that I think we might need. Okay. So let's move forward. I did break this up. I did make this a little better. So, project work, that I foresee, this team or if we break down into smaller teams, we might need, we need to do planning. We need to get those cards. We need to get them weighted so you have a rough idea of how long they're going to take or complicated. We'll talk about what that means, what the velocity means and that kind of thing. We're going to need a visual design, and I'll be honest, I'm not the person you want doing that. So if we have anybody here that's got any inclination on UI, UX, happy to take advice on the designs. We need to build a workboard so we can see where the work's going, who's working on what and when and where, and making sure that things are happening at the right time, that somebody's not building something out ahead of when something else is ready. Okay. Really going to need to keep the README up to date on the repo, because that's going to be an important piece of keeping track of our goals and timelines and things like that. We do the initial project work. We need to build out that pipeline. Need to build out pushing to GitHub pages. I know how to do that. I'll help somebody with that as we go. Want to set it up so that any pull requests need 2 reviewers, and I may amend that when we go in to set that up, because I'd like to, if I can. I don't know if GitHub allows it or not, set myself to be on always as a reviewer, so that you get those 2 reviewers from peers, but making sure I'm in there as one of the reviewers. We'll see how GitHub allows that. I'm not going to. If it allows it, we may take that out later on too. We'll see how that goes too. Okay. And then I would like to build unit tests into this. So for those of you that haven't done unit tests, a great place to learn, and spend some time in there, and have, non-passing unit tests block the pull request. I mean, your pull request can't be closed until your unit tests pass. Okay. We may include end-to-end tests into that scenario as well. And we're going to have to talk about how to put that together, because I don't really want to pull in an outside test suite. I'd like to keep this as simple as possible. And I think we can do some decent end-to-end tests using Jasmine. We might be able to bring in Jest for a little more weight on handling DOM elements and stuff like that, because most of the unit tests that we'll be writing in Jasmine will be functional level tests as opposed to component level tests. And then we'll need some manual testing. So part of my thought there is our GitHub pages essentially becomes our dev environment. So if you haven't worked in a dev stage prod, we probably won't have a staging environment. We'll have a dev environment. That'll be where you guys can go in and play and try out the new code that you wrote and have pushed up, to make sure it actually works in another environment. Works on my machine is one of those horrifying things, right? It works on my machine, but doesn't on somebody else's. So we get that chance to test it before it ends up as a production set of tools. And then I want to make sure accessibility is into this. And I know there are a couple of accessibility heroes out there. I hope we have somebody in this group because that is not my strength area. Just as UI UX, most of the sites I write, I get clients going, this is an internal application. We're not even worried about it. At the most, we might have somebody with color issues, and we will check with them. And if they complain, we'll adjust the colors. Okay. In this application, I can foresee wanting audio. You know, you've got a description that comes up on something they might want to do, and have it read that to them, have it present that to them as, you know, this is training we're talking about. Okay. So what I foresee, and I really have spent a little bit of time thinking about this, is doing pairing sessions a couple times a week. Okay. And I'm talking group pairing sessions. VS Code opened up using the tooling in there. So we're working on the same repository. You guys could be working on a completely separate file that I'm working on. Ooh, we've got, Katrina says, I'm working on an open source project with an accessibility engineer. Cool. So now we know who our accessibility person is. Not going to hold you to that, but great to know that. Okay. So talking about this group pairing, you know, you guys could be working on a completely separate file that I'm working on. You can be looking and referencing, and I want to make sure you guys see how that happens. Okay. These will be recorded. These will go into that YouTube channel. You know, so if we're doing 2 to 3 sessions a week and you can only make it to one, or let's say you have a week where work buries you and you can't make it to anything, go back and check those records. Okay. You got the chance to catch up, to keep up. You may not have to go through everything to get what you need out of it. Okay. That's my hope. Okay. That people can step out and come back to this project as they've got time. Okay. So at the beginning of these sessions, we'll be looking up setting up the repo, setting up the pipelines. If you haven't done the pipelines and that kind of stuff, the CI/CD, it's fun and exciting stuff to set up. Those will be some pretty cool records. Hopefully we won't be recording me cussing too much, but it happens when we're setting up pipelines. Okay. We'll be setting up the Angular base. And I want to make sure I take some time when we set up that Angular. The setup's pretty easy, but to go through how Angular works at its core, because it is, for those of you, I assume the vast majority here have been using React. Angular setup is completely different. Okay, the way Angular works is completely different. It's still JavaScript at its base, so there are a lot of things that are going to be very, very familiar in there. But the way we build it out is going to be different. And I want to take some time when we put that Angular base together. Maybe in that session, maybe in the next one. But I want to spend some time talking about Angular and getting you at least a base common level. So again, that's one. If you can't make the session, come back and take a look. The other factor that comes into play in making sessions and not is, I know at this point we've got folks in the EU area and, you know, folks on the other end of the scale, as far out as Japan and India. We got folks in almost every time zone, I think, in this group of about 30 people, and we have 19 or 20 on. We have 25 on right now, counting myself, and I've got 2 other sessions I'm doing. Okay, one tomorrow and one Tuesday. So, you know, I don't want to pick the times on this. This is one I want to figure out how, and we might have to have some conversation in the Discord on the best way to do it. Part of my thought is if I take a base list of the 30 some odd people, and, you know, the first week say, okay, the first 3 people pick a date and time off my Calendly, and that's going to be one of the 3, so that we kind of randomize where those date times end up for the group. And, you know, because if I do these every time at 9 o'clock in the morning, they're going to be people that this is very painful for. If I do it at noon, there are going to be people that's painful for. If I do it at 5 p.m. Eastern time, that's going to be painful for others. So I think by changing that up, then we can change up who can be there, when and where a little bit easier. And again, as I said, we're recording it, so no big deal there. And these one-on-ones every other week, that can flex, but that would be my target, my goal. Okay, I might be burying myself in saying that, but I'd like to chat. And it doesn't have to be full hour. I usually book things at an hour. Um, it could be just checking in and maybe looking at some of the code for the project or talking through where you might be stuck or where you want to head with it, and what other training resources could you be looking at. So that's part of what I want to focus on in there too, because I want to focus on your growth and learning where you're at with this. And if I'm going to make a recommendation or referral for job positions down the road, we need to talk a lot of code, right? Makes sense. Okay. All right. So, digging into project work here, I do know at some point I'll need a URL and domain. That'll be our production environment. GitHub Pages is great, and it hosts a basic web page without a backend really easily, really nicely. If we opt to have a backend, that's not going to help us there at all. But it also has limitations in the number of, it's not designed to be a production level environment. I haven't pushed anything outside of client work to any external hosting site in many, many, many years. So you guys have done that more recently than I, so we'll have to chat about where the best place is and what domain name to pick up and attach to it and all of that, which is the GitHub Pages in that as well. And I expect, and I would hope over time, that we end up with some solo work where you guys are working together or pairing, or you're working on a card and I'm not there at all. I don't expect that to be recorded. This eventually will be treated as an open source project where, if you want to jump in and fix something, or jump in and add a new feature, why not? I'd love to see it. Okay. Again, that's a way I can evaluate the code you're working, and we're working on a team together. And this is a big team, but we're working on a team together. Okay. I'm going to need some content, as I said. The teachers out there, pay close attention to what we're building here from the perspective of being a teacher, of having students look at this tool and use this tool. And there are some areas on, like, I have that list of the test suggestions that came to mind. Are there others that I missed? Are there others that we could identify that we can push here? I don't know if we need marketing and advertising. I don't know. We'll have to talk about that as we move forward. And I would like to see a list of articles that we put somewhere on the page related to this. I know Khan Academy has some really good articles on test taking and that kind of stuff. So it might be a good way to add that in, that secondary documentation for those that like to read rather than doing the hands-on. Okay. So the next set here this is just a rough outline of what I foresee this looking like, and there's about 3 slides on this, 3 or 4. So the main page, what I foresee is, we're going to have a selector for they can pick grade 3 to 8, 8+, however we identify that adult student, maybe that's how we phrase it. Where it's just a simple, you click it, you pick it, and everything then is geared for that student level. Okay. The list of suggestions, at least the core ones should be identified on that main page. Something that somebody can quickly come in and check. The main page in my mind would be the only one that I'd want to be mobile ready. So if somebody were getting ready to go take a test and they wanted to review real quick what those suggestions were, they could pull it up on their phone, take a look. I'm that kind of test taker. Okay. When I wanted to take my AWS cert, I had my list of things that I wanted to make sure I locked in my head, and I pulled up like 20 minutes early to the test taking facility. I'm reading through this piece of paper. Okay, I'm ready to go. Put that down, go inside, take the test. So if we've got somebody that really wants to look at those suggestions, this would be a good place to have a mobile ready and be able to showcase those suggestions. The list of articles, resources I talked about there, and then starting the test. And this is where I started to dig into, what do I see these practice tests looking like? I'm thinking static data. Okay, we don't need to have tests that randomize or anything like that. It should be the same test they go through every time for that age level. And we can mark in the data which ones do we expect to be an easy question that they can answer right away, and which ones do we expect to be a really complicated question that they might want to skip over, and have questions later on that might answer 1 or 2 of those earlier ones. We might need some tracking. We have to figure out how to track some of this, but things like, well, let's go back to that. But what I see is starting the test in three ways: handhold, gently assist, and summarize. So handhold would be you go through, and when you get to that test question, we pop something up saying, hey, here's the navigation, here's the timer. On the navigation, you see that there's a flag button that you could click so that later you could come back and take a look at this question again. Here's the ABCD that you click to answer your questions. You're handholding. You're walking them through every step of the way. So here, since this is an easy question, let's pick C, which we know is the right answer, and move on to the next question. And then, here's a really hard question. Walk them through every step. Gently assist would be, hey, you're on the page and you're clicking next, and have it pop up and say, hey, instead of clicking next, this should be an easy question. It's 1 + 1, so maybe you want to pick 2. So gently assist. It might, or you've picked an answer and you go to pick another answer and it says, hey, you've already selected one. Odds are when you change your answer, you're going to have it wrong the second time. So that gentle assist, just nudges. And then summarize, that wouldn't show any assistance. But at the end, we can pop up things, and the government would call it walkthrough assistance and performance. Okay. We can, and if there's common naming for this kind of stuff, please let's add that in. Okay. But the summarize at the end, would say, hey, you changed 2 answers. That's something you probably shouldn't do. Or, hey, you spent 30 seconds on average on all of the ones that are easy, and 5 minutes on the ones that are hard. And, maybe on those ones that are hard, you spend less time on it, learning when to move on and that kind of stuff. Okay. So I foresee, these different ways that can go through and practice the test as well. We want to have a test cover page, because most tests have a cover page. I am the kind of test taker, I read every single detail on those cover pages. Okay. Because I don't think I've ever seen a gotcha on those, but that usually tells you how to take the test, what's going to be going on. So if we have this handhold, gently assist, summarize, we should have something in there that details what's going to be going on, and make sure they spend some time on that page getting what's there. Okay. All right. So moving on. Test question page should be fairly simple. And if I'm missing things, this is where we need to identify these. Where you have a question, where you have a timer, where you have navigation, where you have the ability to flag. Nothing complicated there. Then we had a test summary page, which would be the actual test summary page. How did you do on the test kind of thing, right? Did you pass the test? And actually with the AWS tests, that's harder to see whether you passed or not. It's really kind of scary. I almost missed it when I was glancing at that page. And then we're going to need a process summary page, something for us. Like I said, how long did you spend on the questions? Did you skip the hard ones quickly enough? Are you changing answers? That kind of stuff. And for any one of the ways they go through, we should kind of show that at the end to get them familiar with that. And believe it or not, that is my last slide. I got through everything in 30 minutes. Amazing. I didn't think I would go through it that quickly. All right. So yes, this is going to be the time for questions. So Cindy, you got your hand up, please.
Good morning. One of the things that occurred to me as you were going through your vision for this, in the UI, are there going to be the kinds of test-taking tools that kids have on these actual tests? Like, I know NWEA map is a really common one right now, and there are things like a highlighter and a bar that they can use to keep track of where they are on reading passages. And there are a couple other tools. I've been out of the classroom a couple of years now, so I don't remember all of them. But are we going to try to build those in so kids can practice using them? Because especially for the littles, that can be a whole couple of test-taking prep sessions of just, here are the tools, here's how to use them. Please don't forget they exist.
Well, that was, okay, I'm going to set that question aside for a split second, because you're right at the end. What you said, that kids don't even know that they're there. I asked my son last year if he flagged questions and skipped, and he said the tooling wouldn't allow him to do that. Now, honestly, I don't know if the tooling doesn't allow it or if he doesn't realize the tooling allows it. So if there is that kind of tooling in there, I would like to highlight that. I would like to bring that forward. Honestly, it sounds relatively complicated to implement. So maybe that becomes a version 2 or a stretch goal or something like that. We need to get that into our documentation so we know we account for it. So absolutely, I would love to get that in the system eventually. Okay, if it makes it in on day 1 that we release, I don't know. We'd have to see what's there, and I know there are places we can go and we could practice these, take practice tests and check that out, see what the current standards are, what the current tests can do. I would like to keep it as close to, and this is going to be hard to say, as close to what the majority of kids taking tests are seeing. You know, we don't want to just have a whole new random test taking tooling that doesn't look anything like what they're going to be using in the classroom. Now, having said that, I don't know how many are out there. That might be the problem. I mean, we got, just in the US, 50 states with people taking tests. We got people here from countries all over the world. So, you know, there could theoretically be hundreds of test taking suites out there. You know, if we can identify at that grade level, hey, these are the ones that we've identified that we can make it kind of look like. It's not going to be exact, but if it's close, that's good enough in most cases. You know, maybe they pick 3rd grade and, hey, we have identified these, or you can do the generic, something like that, where we can pick up some of the tooling from the existing tests. I'd love to do that. Yes. Again, saying that's a lot of work. May or may not make it into the first round. My guess would be it'd be a second round, maybe even. That's something that we identify to add and update over time too. So it's definitely something to keep in mind. Yes. We have raised hands. So let me open the test raised hands tool, and I do believe Katrina, you are next.
Good morning, everyone. Well, if it's not morning, afternoon, evening, wherever you are. My question is, I know you don't want to have a back end because you said, you know, we don't need to necessarily know who the people are who are taking it, but will there be some sort of mechanism for them to save their progress and track it? Because I would imagine a lot of this is going to be, depending on the age of the child, run with the parent, right? And they may want to be able to see how they're doing and if they're improving, if they need to go back, things like that. Because I know with my son, who's 7, right, a lot of what we do is saying, hey, we'll, like, for instance, a spelling test, right? The first Monday when he gets the words, we have him spell them all without any prep, right? Just to see what he's comfortable with, what he has. And then as the week progresses, it's like, oh, okay, you got 6 out of 10 the first time. Now you're at 8 out of 10. Now you know them all. You're ready for the test kind of deal. So even though we don't need to know who it is, will there be some way they can sort of save their progress?
We could.
Okay.
I would want to discuss that further and what it is we need to track and why. We can use index.db to store locally.
Okay.
It's similar to local storage. The difference is it's more resilient. It stays longer. I do like the concept of having a parent or manager of the account. One of the things I like with Khan Academy is I set up a parent account, and from there I set up my child's account. So I can jump in at any time and see his status and where he's at and what he's doing. However, I'd like to keep really clear on what I intend on this tool is. This is something to showcase how to take a test. You know, I don't know what's important to track with that. You know, maybe we get a group of us parents together and talk about that a little more in depth. Because in my mind, I just want Patrick to run through this and do it however he's comfortable with. Now, when Anne reaches that age, she's doing it younger, I'm going to make sure she goes through the walkthrough, that she goes through that easy route. And, you know, then as she has done that, then let her go through with a little bit of hand holding and see what it does and see how she does. I'm probably going to be hanging over her shoulder as she does that. You know, but you're right. Maybe we do save those our summary page data over time to showcase, hey, you know, we're seeing them spending too long on that you can then have those parental conversations with in a little more depth. So maybe there is the concept of tracking those summaries over time. That's not a bad idea. And maybe additional suggestions for how parents approach helping their kids with that. I do kind of like that idea. And we might be able to get away with doing all that locally. You know, let's circle back on that. Don't let me forget that one. Okay. Okay. So we're good there. All right. Mohammed, your hand is up too.
Hi, Bob, and hi, everyone. When I was teaching, from my experience, that was during live sessions in the examination halls, children had a problem with the motivation to write the answer in the first place. They knew the answer. I knew that they knew it, but they were just plain lazy. Is there any way we could address that issue? I don't know whether it's in the scope of this or not, but I just want to put it out there.
Wow. That's a tough one. I don't know. I don't know what the answer would be there. Let's keep that in mind as something to chat about as we move forward. I know I had the discussion with Patrick recently because he in math was just putting down his answers. He knew what the answers were and he wrote them down. And I mean, some of these could be really, really complicated. And the problem from a teacher's perspective, I know what you're talking about, is if you don't see the work, how can you tell they're on the right track? You know, honestly, I don't know if that's outside the scope of what we're doing here or not. That would be where my discussion would be. Is that something that we can add to the scope of this easily, or is this something that's going to blow us out of the water? My goal is not to build another Khan Academy. I mean, I want to focus on taking a test and being successful taking tests. I've gotten very good at it over the years. Doesn't mean I can, you know, with AWS, doesn't mean I can do the AWS work, but man, I can answer those questions and pass that test with no trouble at all. If you give me about 6 weeks to prep and nothing else to worry about. Okay. So yeah, that might be out of our scope, but yes, let's keep that in mind. Let's circle back to it at some point. Okay. Don't let me forget it. We'll get that in our documentation, maybe under our stretch goals when we reach that point. Okay. All right. So Jack, you had your hand up next. I'm not watching the chat, so if we have something in chat, somebody raise a hand there and let me know. So Jack, you're next.
Oh yeah, hi everyone. Sorry about the echo.
Oh, I'm hoping Jack is trying to figure out how to fix the echo. Really wasn't that bad as long as he talks really slow. All right, so Jack.
Is it better now?
Oh, much better. Yes.
Hello.
Yep, you're good. Go ahead.
Okay. So I was. I'm getting a lot of interference.
Yeah, you were getting a lot of interference. Why don't you mute and type your question into the chat?
Okay.
I'll switch over to the chat because nobody else has
I will
hands.
try chat.
All right, so let's go back through here real quick, make sure I didn't miss anything. Oh, come on. Somebody asked early on, is this my first time doing a group project with 100 guys? Absolutely, yes, it is the first time. This is terrifying me because I don't know if this is going to be a hot mess or if this is going to be really cool or something in between. I'm guessing something in between. Okay, we're going to figure a lot of stuff out early on fairly quickly, I think. Let's see, swinging down. You know, any of these things where you have these ideas on like, hey, the government calls it this. Let's, you know, talk about the terminology, you know, make sure we're on the same page on this kind of stuff too. Motivation to answer and not click through. Yes, absolutely. Built-in slow down functions. I love that idea. You know, and I know one of the ones I didn't put on my list is if you get to the very end and you have like 3 or 4 questions and you haven't got a clue what the answer is, you know, there's always the default answer C. A lot of tests randomize, but some don't. And regardless, if you don't answer a question, that's a missed question and often counts against you. I don't know how it is on the standardized. We'll have to figure that out. But those are kind of things that we need to make sure we get into their minds. Jack, it appears you're logged on twice, is what Katie's saying. Yes. So Jack, if you got a second device connected, either mute it or disconnect. Well, let me see if I can find him and disconnect that. Maybe I can mute something. Jack and Jack. I see Jack and Jack. What can I do? I can remove one from the call, Jack. What do you want me to do? They're both muted right now. All right, I'm going to kick one of the Jacks off and we're going to see what happens. Because it might, I don't know. I haven't tried this before. Okay, so Jack, I've kicked one of your devices off. So the second device is still on. If you're there, if you unmute and try and talk now.
Hey everyone.
Oh, much better.
Okay. Yeah, I was using my laptop, my phone.
Got it. Yes.
So, I was going to add to the question that Mohammed raised about the motivation to answer questions, even though kids know the answer to these. But I heard you say you're not trying to build another Khan Academy, so I'm not sure. But I'll go ahead and give my recommendation anyway.
Okay.
About the motivation part, I was perhaps thinking maybe we could add trophies or games or some sort to be some kind of a reward for kids who answer these questions. I'm not sure if it will help.
No, that's a good idea, because if we're tracking data over time, that gamification, is everybody's saying what I'm getting ready to say on the chat. It's a great motivator. Yes. I like that idea. And by if we're identifying age level, when they first visit, we can increase that gamification on the main screen at the earlier levels. Once they reach like my level as an adult, I don't need a lot of gamification in there. It's kind of fun sometimes, but no, that's certainly some good one to keep in mind too, and get added into our documentation, figure out how we want to add that to it. Cool. Any other questions? Katie, go ahead.
So a question I had, I've been out of the classroom for a bit, but I imagine that some places use computers for standardized testing, but some maybe still use written forms. Is this just to address the online approach?
No, what I want to teach are the concepts. This is test taking in general. Yes, I would like to be able to showcase some of the patterns that we might see in the standardized, but test taking in general, if a teacher puts a test together and you realize you got 2 minutes left on the test because they threw up a 2-minute warning on an hour test, and you've got 10 questions still on there, would it behoove you just to randomly go through and pick an answer and maybe you get it right, as opposed to always getting it wrong because you skipped it? That's a basic test taking skill of evaluating what you're looking at and what your time frame's like. If a kid has never been told this, very hard to realize that that's a good thing to do, especially when you're talking the earlier grades. When you're talking like my son in 6th grade right now. Good Lord, 6th grade. And, I tell him these things. I know the teacher talks through these things, but man, I hear about him taking a test and it's painful because I know he's not using as much as he could. And so I'd really love something to provide those basic test taking skills. If we know that there are specific test suites that have particular tooling, I'd like to be able to address that in some way. But I think the core base test taking skills are really the primary focus. Competitive analysis. Somebody had a chat thing, so I'm jumping back to the chat. Oh, wow. Lots of conversation on, okay, Badger. Yep. Earning Coinbase and the kids' progress. Yep. Competitive analysis out there to see what's working, what's not. Okay, maybe we can incorporate a competitive analysis on what's out there to see what's working or not. Timothy, do you want to tell me what you mean on that?
Yeah, it's just kind of looking at what's like out there like in the market. It's usually what I've usually done like on UX case studies to really kind of lay out like what the features are kind of being used out into the market, and really kind of narrowing down the scope of like the project like in the beginning. Usually just
Okay.
kind of helps the
Sure.
idea, but
And if you're UI UX, we're gonna make you work. But
that's
yes,
my degree in
one of the first things my wife mentioned last night was one of the tests that they use in corrections is the TABE test, and I don't remember which company, but they have a practice test you can take. I don't know how well that practice test addresses any of these. And that certainly would be something to look at, and dig into. Knowing which tests are available, what kind of tests are out there, the more patterns we see, the better we can address that with the UI UX. I agree completely. Wow, we have people joining even now. That's impressive. All right, so Abhi, you had your hand up?
Yeah, hi. Can you hear me?
I can, yes.
Okay. Hi, Bob. So I was wondering, you said you didn't want the platform to be a spin-off of Khan Academy, right? How do you see the kids using this platform? Like, do they keep coming back to this every now and then to improve their testing skills and to learn their grade-wise skills? Or is it a one-off thing, just something to do before a standardized test?
I don't
Because
know. I mean, remember my base goals. My base goals is to help my children. So my goal would be right now when my son does his homework, when he comes home, if he doesn't have homework, he's doing something on Khan Academy. I don't track what it is. I don't care what he does as long as he does something. My thought would be as a parent, as we're approaching the time when he's getting ready to take the standardized tests, that, hey, go out to the test site that I built and run through it a couple times. So maybe once a day he goes through the easy, goes through the intermediate, goes through the hard. Make sure he's locking things down. If I look at I like the idea of tracking, because if we look at what he's done over a couple of days and he's got a couple areas where it says, hey, he's spending too much time on the hard questions, then maybe he and I can then talk about it and help to improve that in some way. Could this be used by a teacher in a classroom with a group of kids that have Chromebooks? Absolutely. I think that's a distinct possibility. My wife, like I said, she's a special ed teacher in corrections. I could see her having students run through that before they take a test. Could it be something where when the standardized test comes up, that the teacher runs a class and has them practice on it for 20 minutes, half an hour? I see that's a distinct possibility. My son does have an assigned machine, so the tracking for him would be on that machine. Does that answer the question?
Yeah, because if we want to include gamification, then I don't think we can stick with a set of static questions. We need randomized testing because they're going to do these questions again and again to improve their skills, right? And if you're going to add gamification to that, then you're going to want to have a very large question bank for each grade.
Well, okay, so let me back up there in saying I would like, I don't want to get too crazy with the questions. That doesn't mean we can't have a lot of questions. Okay. I don't want to get into let's randomize the order of the questions and let's randomize the order of the answers every time. That doesn't mean we couldn't have 20 or 30 or 40 question sets. Because if we're setting up for question 12, might actually have in the question the answer for question 2. If you randomize that order, then that all makes that very complicated. Whereas if we have 20 or 30 or 40 question sets, which just becomes a really big, complicated JSON or a series of files, we can manage that, I think. Does that make sense? All right. And also realize, if we're talking grade level, you're only going to see that set of questions for that grade level year. Each grade level year should have increasingly complicated questions. The 1+1 question's only valid for so many years. I mean, as an adult looking at that isn't even going to make sense. I'm going to need something that's a little more challenging, even as a basic question. So, okay. Katie.
And then just hearing you talk about the bank of questions and things like that, if you're not using a backend, would you be using like file system retrieval for those, or would you consider using a backend to house those?
I would absolutely consider anything this team thinks we need to move to. Okay. I very successfully work with JSON objects on a regular basis, JSON files. I could foresee a lot of this working that way. If the team thinks we need something more substantial, I'm absolutely willing to go that direction. Okay. Yes. So, I'm absolutely not going to turn that side of it down if we need to go that direction. Okay. And to Katrina's question in the chat, the project is more about learning how to take a test than the test itself. I mean, that is the primary focus, is how do we take a test? Whether it's a paper test, whether it's an electronic test, yes, we can focus in on some of the standard tests that are out there and that kind of stuff. But the primary question is, how do we take a test? How do we take a test effectively and increase our odds of passing the test? Because knowing how to properly take a test really increases your odds fairly significantly. I mean, you can add another 10 to 20% to your final score. That's a big deal. Mohammed, you have your hand up.
I'm getting ideas about how, as a teacher, I would like my students to be more prepared for a test.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe I can. I'd like to know the level of preparedness of my students before they take a standardized test.
Sure. One of the things my wife and I chatted about, and we have just a couple minutes left here. I don't want to take this too long, over an hour. One of the things my wife and I talked about is when the correction students go through, they do take a pre-GED test. And this is what they use as a gauge for, are they ready to take the actual GED test? But it's not, there's nothing in there that helps them on basic test taking skills. I know those teachers talk about it, but I guarantee you, every inmate I ever worked with, these are 12-year-old mentalities, just a little bit older than my son. 90% of what that teacher's talking about when it comes to taking tests is going in this year and out this year, and not stopping in between. Okay. This, I would hope, would add another layer to that by actually engaging them through the walkthrough and showing those pieces. Yeah, you're going to get some that just kind of go through and push buttons. Then you get the next layer where they're actually kind of taking a test, but they're going to get some guidance. So, hey, you're trying to change an answer. You probably shouldn't do that. It'll still allow them to do it. But it's going to point out that what you're doing is a bad practice, right? Or not be a best practice. And I'll honestly say, from the time that I learned that one, probably in the last 30 years, I've only ever changed one answer. And that's only because on question 50 of the AWS test, I found the answer for question 9 that I had guessed between two, and I guessed wrong. Okay, I had narrowed down. Already there were two that were clearly the wrong answers. But these two here, one of them was right. I didn't know which one. I guessed. I marked it because I wanted to come back. I hit that one over there, and I'm like, oh, that's the one. So when I hit the end of the test, I came back through. I wrote it down on my little piece of paper, and I came back. That's what I want them to see, is that's really a bad practice. There are times when it's appropriate, but it's very, very, very rare. I don't know that we want to record my voice for the voiceovers of this stuff. Let's be honest, okay? My nickname in corrections was Easy Listening. I hear that even now today. That I have a very easy voice to listen to. I'm not trying to put them to sleep, which it will do over time, okay? Let's be honest. But if we get some decent voice record over some of this, it adds another layer to it. Okay. All right, we have about 2 minutes left. There's something on the chat. Oh, that's Jack laughing at me. Okay, that's fine, Jack. You're allowed to laugh at me. Anything else, guys? Oh, one other thing. I almost forgot, like, one of the most important ones I wanted to do. Okay, so I have a where is it? Hang on. I have the Discord link. You guys probably want the Discord link, right? Because then we can talk further and get to know each other and figure out how this team's going to work. I need to get a list of all the names. I'm probably going to take them right off this scheduled meeting. Wow, people joining like crazy. Remember, when we leave this chat, even though it's recorded, I don't think the messages stay. They are being recorded with the call, so those will be there, so you'll be able to find that Discord later on. I didn't see that before, so we are recording that. We're inviting everybody on YouTube to that Discord now. I think it's a 7-day window on that one, but I'll take a list from this call and the next 2 calls. I'm going to pick the first 3 people. We'll probably start not this coming week, but probably the week after. And we'll schedule the first 3-day sessions, and I'll throw out a way to figure out how to let you guys sign up to that. So it can be more than just that person that picked the date and the time. If you can make it and you want to be there and it's a topic you're interested in, and we'll start to identify what those topics are. We'll probably just build the cards and get the structure in place initially, but maybe one's for building cards, one's for working on structure, and one's for setting up the Angular, and then we can start to talk about how Angular works and that kind of stuff a little quicker. So, maybe we do a little bit of that out of order. I do have a repo in place, so I'm going to have to start getting you guys on that repo as contributors. And at some point, you've got these great ideas that you guys have been throwing out. Write it down somewhere, put it into the Discord somewhere so we don't lose it. So when we come back to adding that documentation and that kind of stuff, that we don't lose that. Again, I am not asking for hard, long commitments. What I'm asking for is help building this. If work or job hiring or whatever means you have to step away for a couple weeks or a month or whatever, I'm hoping to make this easy enough that you can step out and come back at any time. Okay. Love the ideas and the questions. If you had a question that we didn't get to, feel free to reach out to me. Okay. I am going to mess things up. I guarantee it. I'm going to have way too many things on my plate at some point, and I'm going to ask you guys to adjust and shift with me for that a little bit, because this is one person trying to manage now a team of like 30. I think we're up to 32 at the last count I had. We had 2 dropouts. We're up to a team of 30. And in terms of team sizes, the largest I've ever worked with a company was about 18, and that gets pretty chaotic with 18. Okay. Thank you for everything. And yes, we may need a Trello board, but I was planning on using the projects board in the GitHub itself. If that's not in enough depth, then yes, we can go to Trello. I'm fine with that. I am trying to keep some of my costs down too. So if we do Trello, it's probably going to be the free. Okay. Because at this point I'm paying for everything. So we'll figure that out. If the GitHub project board doesn't do what we want, if we're not getting enough depth with it, we can shift over to Trello, and I'll make sure that gets shifted over cleanly. Okay. If I missed anything question wise, let me know. I do have another version of this tomorrow. It's going to be the same thing essentially. Tomorrow at 3, and then another one Tuesday at 6, both Eastern time. So I know at least one person came on in the last 10 minutes. If you wanted to pick up and do this again to see the whole thing, feel free to reach out to me and we'll get you on that if somebody needs that. Okay. Well, I don't need to show you guys all my calendar. There we go. All right. We're 3 minutes after the hour. Any other questions? Anything major we missed? Any comments, concerns? Thank you everybody for showing up. and offering your time. I think that's awesome. If, like I said, if you need to drop. It's not going to hurt me, not going to bother me. I'm not breaking friendships because you decide this project isn't something you want to work on. Okay. You all have shown some exceptional skills. Those of you that are 100 devs that I worked with over the last year, and I've seen some amazing stuff that you folks are doing. So I'm really, really happy to be doing this with you. Okay. Thank you. And I can figure out how to stop the record. Well, apparently you don't click the recording button to stop the record. Well, that's kind of silly, isn't it? Activity is recording. There we go. You have to go back to the. How's that for UI UX, guys? You can't click the recording button to stop the record. You have to go through the menu to get to the stop record.